The night the sky fell, I thought the universe had finally decided to erase my quiet little life. My name is Adrian Vale, and for most of my life, I was just a mechanic living on the outer colony of Kepler 442c. Our world sat at the edge of civilized space, too far from the core worlds to matter, but close enough to trade routes to survive. Most days were quiet. I repaired cargo ships, mining drones, and the occasional damaged shuttle. Nothing exciting ever happened there. Until the war came. It started with distant flashes in the sky, like silent lightning above the atmosphere. The local network reported a battle between two alien fleets somewhere in orbit. Nobody knew why they were fighting above our world, but we all felt the consequences. Hours later, burning debris began falling through the clouds. I remember the first crash clearly. The ground shook like a giant hammer striking the planet. A massive piece of starship wreckage slammed into the desert several kilometers from my workshop. The colony siren screamed. Emergency broadcasts warned us to stay indoors, but curiosity has always been humanity's most dangerous trait. So I grabbed a plasma cutter, my scanner, and my old cargo crawler and drove toward the crash site. The desert looked like a war zone. Pieces of alien metal were scattered across the sand, glowing with heat. Strange symbols flickered on broken panels. Purple smoke drifted into the air. Whatever ship had crashed there was enormous, at least 2 kilometers long before it broke apart. I had never seen alien technology up close before. Most interstellar governments kept their secrets carefully hidden. But the thing that caught my attention wasn't the technology. It was the sound. A faint cry. At first I thought it was an animal trapped in the wreckage. The wind howled across the desert, carrying the sound through twisted metal corridors. Then I heard it again. A baby crying. My heart froze. What in the stars? I climbed through the torn hull of the ship, stepping over shattered consoles and sparks dancing along exposed wiring. The air inside smelled strange, sweet and metallic. The crying grew louder. Eventually, I reached a small chamber that looked untouched by the crash. A circular pod sat in the center of the room, glowing faintly with blue light. Inside it was a baby girl. She couldn't have been more than a few months old. Her skin had a faint silver shimmer, and soft white hair curled around her tiny face. She looked human, but not entirely. Her eyes opened when she saw me. Bright violet. For a moment, the entire chamber seemed to hum with energy. The pod flickered and shut down with a soft hiss. The baby began crying again. I stood there, stunned. You've got to be kidding me. There was no one else alive in the wreckage. My scanner showed dozens of life signs that had already gone cold. Whoever had been protecting this child was gone. I looked down at her small hands gripping the edge of the pod. Well, I muttered softly, lifting her into my arms. I guess you're coming home with me. Raising an alien baby wasn't something I ever expected to do. But life has a strange sense of humor. I named her Lyra. At first, I worried she wouldn't survive our environment. But she adapted quickly. Faster than any human child I had ever seen. She grew rapidly. By the time she was 4 years old, Lyra already spoke 3 languages fluently and could repair simple machinery with me in the workshop. She was curious about everything. Why do stars burn? She once asked while we watched the night sky. Fusion, I replied, tightening a bolt on an engine. Hydrogen smashing together until it becomes helium. She frowned thoughtfully. I think stars are alive. I laughed. Why's that? Because they're lonely. I didn't understand what she meant at the time, but Lyra was always different. Sometimes strange things happened around her. Tools floated slightly off the ground when she was upset. Machines activated without power when she touched them. Once, during a thunderstorm, lightning struck the workshop and she stood there completely unharmed. The electricity danced around her like it recognized her. I knew then she wasn't just alien. She was something far more powerful. Still, to me she was just my daughter. We spent 10 peaceful years together on that quiet colony. Then the galaxy came looking for her. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. Lyra was 14 by then, tall, confident, with that same silver hair shining in the sunlight. She was helping me repair a mining shuttle when the sky suddenly darkened. Not with clouds, with ships.
Hundreds of them.
Massive black warships appeared above the colony, blotting out the stars. Every communication channel lit up with panic. Unknown fleet entering orbit. Energy signatures off the charts. Are they attacking? But they didn't fire. Instead, a single sleek vessel descended slowly toward the desert outside the colony. Lyra stepped outside the workshop and stared at it. Her violet eyes widened. "They're here," she whispered. My stomach twisted. "You know them?" "I think so." The ship landed silently, its surface shining like liquid metal. A ramp extended. 5 tall figures stepped out. They were humanoid, wearing elegant armor that glowed faintly with golden light. Each of them carried a staff topped with a crystal. The one in front removed her helmet. She was older, with pale blue skin and silver markings across her face. When she saw Lyra, she dropped to one knee. The others followed instantly. The entire colony fell silent. "My Empress," the woman said softly. I blinked. "You're what?" Lyra looked just as confused as I was. The kneeling woman continued, her voice trembling. "We have searched the galaxy for 14 years, after the Imperial Cataclysm destroyed the royal fleet. Only then did I realize what she meant. The ship I found in the desert, it hadn't just been a random crash. It had been the Imperial flagship." The woman looked up at Lyra with tears in her eyes. "You are Lyra Celestia, heir of the Strix Empire, ruler of the 7 galactic sectors." The entire colony stared in shock. I slowly turned to Lyra. "Kid, is that true?" She looked down at her hands. I remember flashes. Dreams. A palace among the stars." The woman stood. "Your Majesty, the galaxy has fallen into chaos without you. Rival empires fight endlessly. Billions suffer." She bowed her head. "Only the rightful Empress can unite them again." My chest tightened, because I already knew what this meant. They hadn't come to visit. They had come to take her away. That night, Lyra sat beside me outside the workshop, staring at the stars. The fleet still hovered in orbit. "You knew someday this might happen," she said quietly. "Yeah," I admitted. "Didn't think it would be this dramatic, though." She smiled faintly. "You saved my life." "You were a crying baby in a metal box." I shrugged. "Couldn't just leave you there." Lyra looked at me with those glowing violet eyes. "They told me what happened. My parents died protecting me during the Imperial Cataclysm."
She paused.
"You're the only family I've ever known." My throat tightened. "You don't have to go," I said. She shook her head. "Yes, I do." The wind moved softly across the desert. "Billions of lives depend on the throne," she said. "If I ignore them, the galaxy will burn." She stood slowly. "But I will never forget who raised me." I looked up at her. The little baby I once carried through burning wreckage was gone. In her place stood a ruler. The next morning, the entire colony gathered near the landing ship. The alien officers stood in perfect formation. Lyra walked toward them wearing a long white cloak they had brought for her. She looked like royalty already. Before boarding, she turned back toward me. For a moment, she looked like the same little girl who used to chase drones in my workshop. "Adrian," she said softly. I walked forward. She hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Dad." I swallowed hard. "Go rule the galaxy," I said, "but try not to break it." She laughed. "I'll try." Then she stepped onto the ship. The ramp closed. Moments later, the fleet rose into the sky like a storm of stars. And just like that, she was gone. Years passed. The galaxy changed. News networks began reporting the rise of a mysterious leader who ended wars across multiple star systems. Empires surrendered without battle. Pirate fleets vanished overnight. Trade routes reopened. The galaxy finally had peace again. Her name appeared everywhere. Empress Lyra Celestia, ruler of the Astrix Imperium, the most powerful leader in the galaxy. But on Kepler 442c, life stayed simple. I kept repairing ships, until the day a golden cruiser landed outside my workshop. A royal guard stepped out. "Adrian Vale," he said respectfully. "Her Imperial Majesty requests your presence." I raised an eyebrow. "Requests?" He smiled slightly. "She insisted." Minutes later, I stepped aboard the cruiser. The ship lifted into orbit smoothly. Inside, everything was elegant. Walls of crystal, glowing star maps, and silent servants moving gracefully. Eventually, the guard opened a massive door. Beyond it was a throne room overlooking the stars. And sitting on the throne was Lyra. But she was no longer the teenager who left. She looked older now, stronger. Her silver hair flowed behind a crown of starlight. When she saw me, her serious imperial expression instantly disappeared. She jumped off the throne. "Dad." Before the guards could react, she ran across the hall and hugged me tightly. I laughed. Empress of the galaxy, still tackling people like a kid. She grinned. "I missed you." I looked around the enormous chamber. "So, this is your empire now?" She nodded. "Everything." Then she gently took my arm and guided me toward a window overlooking countless ships. "But none of it would exist without you." I looked out at the endless stars. "Not bad for a baby I pulled from a crashed spaceship." Lyra smiled softly. "The galaxy calls me Empress." She paused. "But to you, I'll always be the girl you rescued from the ruins." And as we stood there together, watching the stars she now ruled, I realized something incredible. Sometimes the smallest choices, like saving a crying baby in the desert, can change the fate of the entire galaxy.